To everyone around him, he was the kind of man people admired. Sharp suits, a confident smile, the life of every dinner party. But what if I told you that behind those polished appearances, behind the carefully crafted charm, he had a secret so dark that when it finally came to light, it left an entire community reeling in shock? What if the man people trusted the most was the same man who committed the kind of crime you only expect to see in the darkest corners of the internet? Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to Byte Crimes. Your support is what encourages us to keep bringing you chilling, educational, and eye-opening true crime stories like this. All right, sit back, because this one is a story that starts with charm, slips into betrayal, and ends in tragedy. Let's begin. Meet Daniel Cross. At 40 years old, Daniel was the image of success. He drove a sleek car, owned a modern condo in a bustling U.S. city, and walked into rooms with the kind of self-assurance that made people think he had life all figured out. To his colleagues, he was a respected consultant in IT security. To his neighbors, a polite, well-dressed man who always waved good morning. But behind closed doors, Daniel carried a secret that no one was supposed to know. He wasn't just a man who worked in cybersecurity. He was exploiting it at night. When his neighbors thought he was sipping wine or reading, Daniel was deep in the shadows of the dark web, running operations that ranged from identity theft to large-scale online fraud. His charm was his shield, and his intelligence was his weapon. Few could imagine that the same hands typing cheerful emails at work were also coding scripts to drain people's bank accounts in silence. Daniel wasn't living this double life alone. At 25, Madison Hale became his mistress. She was younger, vibrant, and convinced she'd found a man who could protect and provide for her. Daniel showered her with gifts, designer handbags, trips to expensive restaurants, even cash when she needed it. But Madison wasn't blind. She was smart, observant, and curious. The more time she spent with Daniel, the more questions piled up. Where did all the money come from? Why did he always lock his laptop the moment she walked into the room? Why did he sometimes disappear into his office for hours at night, leaving her to fall asleep alone on the couch? For a while, Madison convinced herself not to ask. After all, wasn't she enjoying the lifestyle? But curiosity has a way of pushing past comfort. One night, while Daniel stepped out to take a call, Madison's eyes fell on his computer screen, still glowing, unlocked for once. And what she saw changed everything. There were files encrypted, but with folder names that spoke volumes. Accounts, transactions, scripts, and one folder chillingly labeled Ghost Ops. With trembling hands, Madison clicked one open and found records of stolen credit cards, personal identities, and lists of transactions that clearly weren't legal. Her heart pounded. The man she thought she knew, the man who told her he loved her, wasn't just hiding secrets. He was a criminal. When Daniel returned, Madison tried to act normal. But inside, she was panicking. Should she confront him? Should she leave quietly? Should she go to the police? Days turned into nights of silence, and her distance didn't go unnoticed. Daniel sensed a shift in her. The woman who once laughed freely was now cautious, guarded. And Daniel, paranoid by nature from years of cybercrime, began to suspect. One evening, Madison broke. Tears streaming, she confronted him. "Daniel, what are you doing? I saw the files. The fraud, the hacking. This isn't who you told me you were." Daniel froze. The room seemed to shrink. In that moment, he knew his carefully built double life was cracking open. Madison wasn't just his lover anymore. She was a liability. Faced with exposure, Daniel's mind spiraled. If Madison went to police, his empire would collapse. Years of fraud, millions stolen, his spotless public reputation, all gone. So he made a choice, a chilling, irreversible choice. Instead of coming clean, instead of finding another way out, Daniel decided that Madison could not live to tell what she knew. The murder was cold, calculated. He invited her over one night, pretending to reconcile. He poured her a drink, spoke softly, even played her favorite song. Then, in the shadows of his luxury condo, he ended her life. It wasn't rage. It wasn't passion. It was fear, and the belief that her silence and death would bury his secret forever. For the next 5 years, Daniel lived as though nothing had happened. Madison's disappearance was brushed off. Friends thought she had left the city, maybe chasing new opportunities. Her family filed missing person reports, but leads went cold. Daniel, meanwhile, grew bolder. His cybercrime empire expanded, money flowed in, and his charm fooled everyone around him. But guilt has a way of haunting even the most calculated minds. Some nights, Daniel swore he could still hear Madison's voice in the quiet hum of the servers. Still, no one suspected him. To the world, he was untouchable. Or so he thought. It began with a small mistake. Investigators working on a cyber fraud task force stumbled upon a trail of digital breadcrumbs that led them closer to Daniel. A money transfer flagged by an overseas bank, a script that bore his coding style, and an anonymous whistleblower who claimed to know something about his personal life. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form. And soon, Madison's cold case, her disappearance, intersected with Daniel's cyber crimes. The same man who had typed code in secrecy now had his past clawing back to the surface. The net was tightening, investigators closing in. But what they were about to uncover wasn't just cyber fraud. It was something darker, something buried for 5 long years. For 5 years, Daniel Cross lived under the illusion of invincibility. He was careful, meticulous even. But in the world of cybercrime, all it takes is one mistake. That mistake came when an international bank flagged a suspicious wire transfer. The amount wasn't massive by Daniel's standards, but it was routed through layers of shell accounts, one of which was lazily connected to a personal email he once used years ago. Investigators at first thought it was a dead lead, until they noticed something else. The coding patterns and the script's tide of fraud matched others seen in long unsolved cyber heists. The FBI's cybercrime unit began piecing it together. Daniel Cross, the respectable consultant, suddenly appeared on their radar. But what really set alarms ringing was when they compared his digital trail with old missing person files. Madison Hale's case came back into focus. At first, Madison's disappearance was written off. Young adults vanished for countless reasons: new jobs, bad relationships, running from family drama. But Madison wasn't the type to vanish without a trace. Her friends remembered her tearfully confiding that something wasn't right with Daniel. She had hinted that he wasn't who he pretended to be. Investigators reopened her file, this time to the lens of Daniel's cyber operations. They discovered she had withdrawn large sums of cash in the weeks before she went missing, as though preparing to leave someone or something behind. Phone records showed her last calls with Daniel. Suddenly, the picture sharpened. This wasn't just about cyber fraud anymore. There was a far darker crime waiting beneath the surface. When word began spreading that Daniel Cross, the same man who sponsored charity runs, who hosted neighborhood barbecues, was under federal investigation, the community couldn't believe it. He was the type of man who looked you in the eye, shook your hand firmly, and asked about your kids. But investigators knew that charm often hides the darkest secrets. Behind the warm smile was a man who silenced the only person who truly knew the depth of his double life. And Madison's family, who had spent 5 years begging for answers, finally felt both dread and relief. Dread because the worst was being confirmed. Relief because at last, someone was listening. The real turning point came when investigators got a warrant for Daniel's storage unit. Inside, they found encrypted hard drives, burner phones, and documents linking him to offshore accounts. But buried beneath boxes of tech gear was something more chilling: a piece of Madison's jewelry, an engraved bracelet her mother had given her for her 21st birthday. It was a kind of mistake seasoned criminals rarely make, but Daniel had kept it. Maybe as a trophy, maybe out of guilt. Either way, it was damning. Forensic teams matched DNA traces in Daniel's condo to Madison. Suddenly, her disappearance became a murder investigation. When federal agents finally knocked on Daniel's door, he tried to maintain his usual calm. But this time, his charm couldn't protect him. Neighbors watched in disbelief as Daniel Cross, the man they thought had it all, was led away in handcuffs. The same hands that once typed lines of code to steal fortunes now bound tightly in chains of accountability. At the police station, Daniel's facade cracked. For hours he denied everything, insisting Madison had left him and that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. But evidence doesn't bend to words. The digital trails, the bracelet, the DNA, every piece built a wall around his lies. The courtroom became a stage where Daniel's double life was exposed for all to see. Prosecutors laid out the story. A man who thrived in the shadows of the internet, who lived by deception, and who chose murder over exposure. Madison's family sat in the gallery, clutching tissues, reliving the horror they feared but never confirmed. Her mother's testimony broke the room. She trusted him, she loved him, and he took her from us. Daniel's defense tried to argue there was no body, no definitive proof of murder. But the circumstantial web was too strong, and his cybercrimes provided a motive. Jurors listened, watched, and weighed every detail. In the end, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Daniel Cross was sentenced to life in prison. The man who once controlled people's financial lives with keystrokes now found himself in a cell, his future reduced to 4 walls and a locked door. Madison's family wept at the verdict, a bittersweet mix of justice and sorrow. They had answers, but no closure could truly heal the wound. The community, too, reeled. People questioned how they had been fooled, how a man so polished could also be so cold. And perhaps most haunting of all was a lesson. Lies can build a life, but only for so long. Eventually, the truth claws its way to the surface. This case wasn't just about cybercrime or fraud. It was about human choices, how greed, fear, and secrecy can twist a man into something unrecognizable. Daniel thought he could outsmart everyone. He thought by silencing Madison, his empire would stay hidden. But what he didn't realize is that violence doesn't erase the past. It only adds blood to the lies. And as we've seen time and time again, secrets built on deception always unravel. The internet may provide shadows to hide in, but no shadow lasts forever. Thank you for staying with us through this chilling story. Daniel Cross's tale is a reminder that cybercrime doesn't just happen on screens. It destroys lives in the real world. Madison deserved better. And Daniel's downfall is proof that no crime, no matter how carefully hidden, goes unnoticed forever. If you found this story impactful, please hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And most importantly, subscribe to Byte Crimes. It's your support that motivates us to keep bringing you powerful, chilling, and educational stories like this. Stories that reveal the dangers of greed, the weight of secrets, and the true cost of cybercrime. Until next time, stay safe online. And remember, the truth always finds its way out.